911, what's your emergency? There's been an accident at SeaWorld. The orca? Oh God, the trainer. She's not moving. The whale grabbed her and threw her. Please, we need paramedics now. In the gleaming amphitheater of SeaWorld San Diego, beneath a perfect California sun, what began as a routine afternoon show would become a nightmare that shattered the illusion of safety between humans and the ocean's apex predators. The date was March 15, 2019. The time, 2:47. The water temperature, a carefully controlled 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Every detail had been meticulously planned, every safety protocol supposedly in place. But none of it would matter in the next 7 minutes. Lisa Park was 28 years old, a senior marine mammal trainer with a smile that could light up the darkest corners of the backstage areas. She had dedicated the last 8 years of her life to understanding, training, and performing with orcas. That afternoon, she stepped onto the platform. Wearing her signature wetsuit, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, completely unaware that she would never walk out of that stadium the same way again. The 6,000-pound orca waiting in the water had a name that would soon be whispered in horror by everyone who witnessed what happened next. Samson. He had been acting differently all morning, but the show must go on. The stands were packed with over 3,000 spectators, including dozens of children clutching their stuffed Shamu dolls, their faces painted with dolphins and whales, their excitement palpable in the salt-tinged. This is Lisa Park's story. A story of trust shattered in seconds, of the thin line between performance and peril, and the moment when a magnificent creature reminded humanity that some boundaries should never be crossed. What you're about to witness isn't just another animal attack story. It's a wake-up call that forever changed how we view the relationship between humans and captive orcas. You're watching Animal Attack Chronicles, where we bring you the most shocking real-life animal encounters, thoroughly researched and respectfully told. If this story grips you, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon, because what you're about to witness will change how you see marine parks forever. But be warned, this isn't just another SeaWorld incident. This is the attack that even veteran trainers call the throw. That changed everything. The audience that day had no idea they were about to witness history. They came for the splashes, the synchronized swimming, the majestic breach of a killer whale against the backdrop of Mission Bay. Parents had paid $89 per ticket, packed cameras and ponchos, promised their children memories that would last a lifetime. They would get their memorable experience, but not the kind anyone had bargained for. Security footage would later show Lisa doing her final equipment check at 2:31 p.m. She tested her emergency recall signal, checked her wetsuit zipper, and exchanged a fist bump with fellow trainer Marcus Rodriguez. Something feels off about Samson today, Rodriguez would later testify. He told her. Lisa's response? He's just being moody. We've worked through worse. Those would be some of the last coherent words she would speak for the next 3 months. The stadium's underwater viewing area was packed with visitors pressing their faces against the 6-inch thick acrylic panels, watching Samson glide past with what seemed like graceful indifference. But marine biologist Dr. Catherine Wells, who happened to be visiting that day with her daughter, noticed something others missed. His eye movement was erratic, she would later tell investigators. In my 20 years studying orcas, I'd never seen that particular pattern of agitation. I actually grabbed my daughter's hand to leave, but then the music started. That music, an upbeat remix of ocean sounds mixed with pop melodies, had played thousands of times before. It was Samson's cue, Lisa's entrance theme, and the audience's signal that magic was about to happen. The first 3 notes triggered a Pavlovian response in the crowd. Phones came out, children rushed to the splash zone, and conversations ceased. Lisa emerged from the trainer platform with her characteristic confidence, raising both arms to acknowledge the thunderous applause. The sun caught the droplets of water on her wetsuit, creating a momentary halo effect that several audience members captured in what would become the last photos ever taken of Lisa Park standing upright. She blew a whistle, and Samson rose from the depths, his massive dorsal fin cutting through the surface like a black sail against the cerulean water. For exactly 4 minutes and 23 seconds, everything went according to plan. Lisa and Samson performed their routine flawlessly, the shallow water work, the splash behaviors, the synchronized spins that had taken years to perfect. The crowd was mesmerized. Children squealed with delight as planned waves soaked the first 5 rows. Instagram stories captured what appeared to be another perfect show at the happiest place in the ocean. Then, at 2:51 p.m. and 17 seconds, Samson missed his cue. It was subtle, a half-second delay in his response to Lisa's hand signal for a backflip. Most of the audience didn't notice. But Lisa did. And in the control booth, veteran show coordinator Janet Phillips reached for her radio. She never got to make that call. Lisa Park wasn't just another marine mammal trainer chasing an ocean dream. She was SeaWorld San Diego's golden child, the trainer other trainers watched to learn, the one management trusted with their most challenging animals, the face they put on billboards along Interstate 5. A profession where turnover was high and burnout common, Lisa had not only survived but thrived for 8 remarkable years. Born on July 12, 1990, in landlocked Topeka, Kansas, Lisa's obsession with the ocean began with a documentary she watched at age 7. Saw Free Willy and that was it, her mother, Caroline Park, would later tell reporters through tears. But it wasn't about freeing the whale for her. She wanted to be the one in the water, the one who understood them. She'd fill our bathtub and hold her breath underwater, timing herself with my kitchen timer. Her father, Robert Park, a structural engineer, built her a 15-foot above-ground pool in their backyard when she turned 10. Lisa spent entire summers in that pool, practicing swimming techniques she'd studied in library books, developing the lung capacity that would later allow her to hold her breath for nearly 4 minutes underwater. Neighbors thought the Parks were raising a future Olympian. They had no idea their daughter's dreams swam in much deeper, more dangerous waters. Lisa's path to SeaWorld wasn't typical. She earned a full academic scholarship to the University of Miami, where she double-majored in marine biology and psychology. Her thesis, Cognitive Recognition Patterns in Captive or Sinus Orca, caught the attention of SeaWorld's head trainer, Mitchell Lawson. I'd never seen an undergraduate demonstrate such innate understanding of orca behavior, Lawson wrote in Lisa's recommendation letter. She seemed to think like them. But Lisa's gift went beyond academic achievement. She possessed what veteran trainers called water presence, an almost supernatural ability to remain calm and authoritative in the water. During her initial swim test at SeaWorld, she stayed submerged alongside a 4,000-pound Pacific white-sided dolphin for 3 minutes without showing any signs of panic, even when the dolphin playfully bumped her. The evaluation team was stunned. Her friends from training described Lisa as fearless but never reckless. Jessica Thompson, who went through SeaWorld's intensive 18-month trainer program with Lisa, recalls their first indirect water work with orcas. We were all terrified. These are apex predators and you're standing on a platform inches from their teeth. But Lisa? She walked up to that platform like she was meeting an old friend. The orca, Corky, immediately responded to her. It was like watching someone discover they could speak a language they'd never studied. Lisa's personal life revolved entirely around her work. She lived alone in a modest apartment in Pacific Beach, just a 10-minute drive from SeaWorld. Her living room walls were covered with photos, not of family gatherings or nights out with friends, but of her with various marine mammals. Samson featured prominently in at least a dozen frames. Her refrigerator was covered with children's drawings sent by young fans, all depicting her swimming with orcas, all signed with messages like, "To the Mermaid Lady," or "Best Whale Trainer Ever." She had ended a 3-year relationship with fellow trainer David Chen just 6 months before the attack. Lisa loved those animals more than she could ever love a person, Chen would later reflect. I don't say that with bitterness. It was just who she was. When Samson was sick with a respiratory infection in 2017, she slept on the platform beside his pool for 5 nights straight. She'd cancel dinner plans if one of her animals seemed off. The orcas weren't just her job, they were her family, her purpose, her entire world. Lisa's dedication earned her rapid advancement at SeaWorld. By 26, she was the youngest senior trainer in the park's history, authorized for full water work with all 7 of the facility's orcas. Her signature move, a spectacular hydrohop where Samson would propel her 15 feet into the air, had become the grand finale of the afternoon show. Marketing used her image on everything from annual passes to plush toys. She was in many ways the face of the post-Blackfish SeaWorld, proof that the relationship between trainers and orcas could be beautiful, safe, and mutually beneficial. But those who knew Lisa best noticed troubling changes in the months before the attack. Her usual perfectionism had morphed into something more obsessive. She'd stay hours after her shift ended, reviewing underwater footage of her performances, analyzing every hand signal, every response time. She kept talking about the connection. Remember Dr. Sarah Martinez, SeaWorld's staff psychologist. She believed she and Samson had developed a communication that transcended traditional training. She'd say things like, "He tells me what he needs," or "I can feel his moods before he shows them." Lisa had begun keeping a detailed journal about her interactions with Samson. Investigators would later find entries that revealed an increasingly complex emotional relationship with the orca. Samson was frustrated today, she wrote 3 weeks before the attack. Not aggressive, just different. He kept swimming to the gate that leads to the larger pool. "I wish I could give him what he wants. I wish I could make them understand that he needs more space, more stimulation. But my job is to keep him performing, keep him happy. Sometimes I wonder if I'm his trainer or his prison guard." Her mother, Caroline, visited her daughter just 2 weeks before the attack. She seemed tired, more than usual. I asked if she was taking care of herself and she laughed it off. But when we went to lunch, she kept checking her phone. Apparently, Samson hadn't eaten his morning fish. To actually cut our lunch short to go back and check on him. I asked her, "Honey, don't they have other trainers?" And she looked at me like I'd suggested leaving a child home alone. "Mom," she said, "Samson trusts me. I can't let him down." That trust would be tested in ways no one could have imagined. Lisa Park, the girl from Kansas who fell in love with the ocean, who dedicated her life to understanding its most magnificent predators, who believed that love and respect could bridge the gap between species, was about to learn that some bridges are built over chasms too deep to cross. Her unwavering faith in her connection with Samson, the very trait that made her exceptional, would lead her into waters from which there was no safe return. Orcas are the undisputed sovereigns of the sea, apex predators that have ruled the oceans for millions of years. In the wild, they travel up to 100 miles a day, dive to depths of 500 feet, and live in complex matriarchal societies that scientists are only beginning to understand. They possess the second largest brain of any marine mammal, with a highly developed limbic system that processes emotions in ways that might surpass human capacity. These aren't just animals, they're sentient beings with languages, cultures, and generational knowledge passed down through their pods. The orca that would change Lisa Park's life forever was nothing like his wild cousins. Samson was born in captivity on August 3, 2009, at SeaWorld, Orlando, the product of artificial insemination between Takara, a female captured from Iceland, and Quito, a second-generation captive male. From his first breath, Samson's world was concrete and glass, measured in gallons rather than miles, bounded by walls his echolocation told him were impenetrable. At 5,800 pounds and 21 feet long, Samson was considered mid-sized for a male orca, though in the confines of his 1.5 million gallon enclosure he seemed massive. His dorsal fin, which would have stood proud and straight in the ocean, had begun the characteristic collapse seen in captive males by age 5. SeaWorld's veterinarians insisted this was cosmetic, not a health issue, but former trainer Michael Garrett disagreed. The collapsed fin is a visual reminder of everything wrong with captivity. It's not just gravity, it's defeat. Lisa first encountered Samson in 2014 when he was transferred to San Diego as part of SeaWorld's breeding program. She was still a junior trainer. Then, limited to dry work and indirect contact. But even from behind the protective barriers, she felt drawn to him. "He's different," she wrote. Her journal that first week. The other orcas performed their behaviors mechanically, perfectly trained but emotionally distant. Samson watches me. Really watches. When I move along the platform, his eyes follow. When I speak, he tilts his head. It's like he's trying to figure me out as much as I'm trying to figure him out. For 2 years, Lisa worked exclusively with other animals while Samson was handled by senior trainers. But she never missed his sessions, studying his responses, learning his preferences. She noticed things others missed: how he favored his left pectoral fin when turning, how he responded better to lower-pitched whistles, how he became agitated when helicopters flew overhead. When she finally earned her water work certification in 2016, she requested Samson as her primary assignment. Their partnership began cautiously. SeaWorld had implemented stricter protocols following previous incidents, requiring extensive desensitization. Work before any direct water contact. For 6 months, Lisa and Samson worked on relationship building. She'd feed him by hand, rub his rostrum, gradually enter the water while he remained stationed at the platform. Trust takes time, head trainer Mitchell Lawson reminded her. Respect takes longer. Never forget that he chooses to cooperate. The day he chooses not to, physics wins. But Samson seemed to welcome Lisa's presence. Their sessions progressed remarkably fast. Within a year, they were performing complex waterwork routines that took other trainer orca pairs twice as long to master. Lisa could ride his pectoral fin around the pool, stand on his rostrum. As he lifted her above the water, even performed the dangerous hydrohop where he would launch her skyward with his nose. Audiences loved. Management saw dollar signs. Everything seemed perfect. Yet experts outside SeaWorld were growing concerned. Dr. Ingrid Visser, a New Zealand orca researcher who had observed Samson during a professional visit, submitted a warning report that SeaWorld largely ignored. Samson displays signs of chronic stress and psychological disturbance, she wrote. He engages in repetitive behaviors, swimming in circles, grinding his teeth on the pool walls, floating motionless for hours. These are not normal orca behaviors. They're coping mechanisms for an intelligent being trapped in an environment that cannot meet his psychological needs. The warnings intensified after an incident in September 2018. During a training session, Samson refused to release Lisa's foot after a routine foot push behavior. For 45 seconds that felt like hours, he held her underwater while she remained calm, using her training to avoid triggering a more aggressive response. He eventually let go, and Lisa surfaced gasping but unharmed. SeaWorld classified it as non-aggressive displacement behavior in their incident report. They gave Samson a week off from shows, then resumed the regular schedule. Dr. Jeffrey Vontra, a former SeaWorld trainer turned critic, reviewed the footage of that incident. That wasn't displacement behavior, that was testing. Samson was seeing what he could get away with. In the wild, orcas are apex predators who test boundaries constantly. In captivity, those instincts don't disappear. They just get redirected at the only available targets, their trainers. Lisa dismissed these concerns. In her mind, the September incident had actually strengthened their bond. He was communicating with me, she told concerned colleagues. He held me but didn't hurt me. He was gentle. He was showing me he could hurt me but chose not to. That's trust. She began spending even more time with Samson, arriving early to swim with him before the park opened, staying late for extra training sessions. But Samson was changing. Maintenance workers reported finding deep gouges in the pool walls where he'd been raking his teeth. His food consumption became erratic, some days eating his full 200 pounds of fish, other days refusing everything except salmon. He began jaw-popping. At other trainers, a threat display that made them reluctant to work with him. Only Lisa seemed immune to his increasing agitation. The final warning came from an unexpected source. Thomas Hargrove, a night security guard with no marine mammal training, filed a report on March 1, 2019, exactly 2 weeks before the attack. The large male orca in Pool 3 exhibited unusual behavior during my 2 a.m. rounds. He was spy-hopping repeatedly at the trainer platform, vocalizing in patterns I've never heard before. It sounded almost like screaming. Flashlight on the water, he charged at the wall closest to me. I've worked here 8 years. I've never seen anything like it. SeaWorld's response was to install underwater cameras to monitor Samson's overnight behavior. The footage they captured in those final 2 weeks should have been enough to cancel every show. Samson spent hours ramming his head against the gates separating the pools. Inverted for extended periods, a behavior associated with extreme psychological distress. Most disturbing, he began what trainers call targeting, focusing intense attention on specific spots where trainers typically entered the water. On March 13, just 48 hours before the attack, internationally renowned orca expert Dr. Naomi Rose sent an urgent email to SeaWorld's corporate offices. Based on the behavioral reports I've reviewed, Samson is exhibiting pre-incident indicators consistent with several historical aggressive events. I strongly recommend suspending all water work immediately pending a full behavioral assessment. The email was forwarded to legal, filed away, and never reached the trainers who needed to see it most. Lisa noticed Samson's changes but interpreted them differently. He's evolving, she wrote in her final journal entry. Our communication is reaching a new level. He's showing me more of his true self, not just the trained behaviors but his real personality. Tomorrow's show will be special. I can feel it. She was right about one thing. Tomorrow's show would indeed be special. It would be the day Samson stopped pretending to be tame. 3. Reminded everyone watching that no amount of training, love, or trust can fully suppress 35 million years of evolution. The day he chose, for reasons we may never fully understand, to show the world what an orca in captivity really thinks about the humans who dare to swim in their prison. In the 2 weeks leading up to March 15th, SeaWorld San Diego became a pressure cooker of ignored warnings and mounting concern. Samson's behavioral changes were impossible to miss, yet the machinery of commercial entertainment ground forward, powered by ticket sales, corporate expectations, and a dangerous cocktail of human hubris and institutional blindness. The first undeniable sign came on March 1st when Samson began refusing certain commands during shows. Not all commands. He still performed his basic behaviors, but the complex synchronized routines with Lisa started falling apart. During the 2 p.m. show on March 3rd, he simply sank to the bottom of the pool when cued for their signature hydro hop, leaving Lisa treading water awkwardly while 3,000 confused spectators waited. She covered brilliantly, turning it into an impromptu educational moment about orca autonomy, but backstage concern was growing. Dr. Rebecca Sterling, SeaWorld's head veterinarian, conducted a full medical examination on March 5th. Her report, later subpoenaed during the investigation, revealed troubling findings. Samson presents with elevated cortisol levels consistent with chronic stress. Multiple fresh rake marks on pectoral fins suggest aggressive interactions with pool walls. Dental degradation has accelerated, 3 broken teeth in the last month alone. From concrete gnawing. Recommend immediate behavioral intervention and show schedule reduction. The recommendation was overruled by park management. Spring break was approaching, their busiest and most profitable season. Reducing shows meant reducing revenue. Instead, they implemented what they called modified protocols, shorter sessions, more frequent breaks, increased fish rewards. It was like putting a bandage on an arterial bleed. Other trainers began reporting disturbing encounters. Marcus Rodriguez, a 10-year veteran, experienced what he described as his first truly fearful moment with Samson on March 8th. I was doing a simple side-by-side swim, something we'd done hundreds of times. Suddenly, rolled toward me, and I saw his eye. It wasn't the calm, intelligent look I was used to. It was calculating. He opened his mouth slightly, enough to show his teeth, then accelerated past me, his tail fluke missing my head by inches. The turbulence spun me completely around. When I surfaced, he was spy-hopping, watching me. I've never exited a pool so fast. Rodriguez formally requested to be removed from Samson's trainer rotation. His request was granted, but it meant Lisa had to pick up extra sessions. She was now spending up to 8 hours a day with Samson, far exceeding recommended interaction limits. Colleagues noticed physical changes in her: weight loss, dark circles under her eyes, a persistent cough from too much time in chlorinated water. But Lisa insisted she was fine, that Samson needed consistency, needed her. The week of March 10th brought a cascade of incidents that should have shut down the entire operation. On Monday, Samson broke the underwater viewing window, not completely, but enough to cause a spiderweb of cracks that required emergency repairs. The force required to damage 6-inch acrylic design to withstand millions of gallons of pressure was staggering. Engineers estimated he'd hit it at nearly 30 miles per hour. On Tuesday, during a training session, he grabbed a basketball, a typical enrichment toy, and methodically tore it apart, maintaining eye contact with Lisa the entire time. It was deliberate, said assistant trainer Jennifer Walsh, who witnessed it. He held the ball in his teeth, positioned himself so Lisa could see clearly, then slowly, piece by piece, destroyed it. When he finished, he spit the remains at her feet. I've seen orcas play rough with toys. This wasn't play. Wednesday brought the most chilling incident. During the morning feed, Samson began vocalizing in patterns no one had heard before. Dr. N. Bowles, a bioacoustics expert who happened to be visiting, recorded the sounds. Her analysis, completed after the attack, revealed something extraordinary. These vocalizations don't match any known orca dialect. He was creating new sounds, possibly expressing emotions or concepts, for which his species has no natural vocabulary. In human terms, he was trying to say something that's never been said before. Lisa's response to these escalating warnings revealed the dangerous psychology of human-animal relationships in captivity. She interpreted every aggressive behavior as communication, every threat display as trust. "You don't understand him like I do," she told concerned colleagues. "He's not angry, he's frustrated. He's trying to tell me something. I just need to figure out what." Her family noticed the obsession consuming her. Her sister, Amanda, visited on March 12th and was shocked by what she saw. Lisa looked exhausted, almost manic. She couldn't stop talking about Samson, his moods, his preferences, what he'd done that day. When I suggested she take a vacation, she actually got angry. "I can't leave him," she said. "He depends on me." I asked if she was talking about the whale or a child. SeaWorld's corporate oversight, meanwhile, was virtually non-existent. Regional Manager Dale Patterson visited on March 13th for a routine inspection. He spent exactly 12 minutes observing Samson, most of it from the VIP viewing area while eating lunch. His report stated, "Animal appears healthy and responsive. Shows running on schedule. No concerns noted." He never spoke to the trainers, never reviewed the incident reports, never watched the overnight footage that showed Samson's increasingly erratic behavior. The final 48 hours before the attack were a crescendo of missed opportunities. On March 14th, Samson refused to participate in the morning show entirely. He stationed himself at the bottom of the deepest part of the pool and wouldn't respond to any recall signals. The show was canceled, blamed on technical difficulties. Lisa spent 3 hours in the water that afternoon, trying to reconnect with him. She finally got him to surface and accept fish, which management saw as a victory. They scheduled him for all 3 shows the next day. That night, security footage showed Samson exhibiting what marine mammal behaviorists call anticipatory aggression: rapid circular swimming, repeated breaching, and aggressive jawing at the air. He didn't sleep, didn't rest, just swam in increasingly violent patterns. At 4:37 a.m. on March 15th, he struck the pool wall so hard that it triggered seismic sensors in the geology department at nearby UC San Diego. The morning of the attack, Lisa arrived at 6 a.m., 2 hours before her shift. She found Samson floating motionless at the surface, a behavior called logging that can indicate either rest or severe psychological distress. When she called his name, he didn't respond. When she slapped the water, their usual greeting, he sank slowly out of sight. She entered the shallow ledge and waited. After 10 minutes, he surfaced directly in front of her, so close she could have touched his rostrum. They stayed that way for nearly a minute, silent, still, staring at each other. It was beautiful and terrifying, recalled maintenance worker Carlos Mendez, who witnessed it while cleaning the stadium. Like they were having a conversation without words. Then the whale made this sound, not a vocalization, more like a sigh, and swam away. The trainer, Lisa, she looked, I don't know how to describe it. Relieved? Sad? Like she just said goodbye to someone. The first show at 10 a.m. went surprisingly well. Samson performed every behavior, hit every mark. The crowd was thrilled. Management was ecstatic. Lisa was cautiously optimistic. Maybe he just needed to work through something, she told Marcus during the lunch break. Maybe. We're past it now. The 12:30 p.m. show was canceled when Samson wouldn't leave the holding pool. Lisa spent the break talking to him through the gates, feeding him salmon, his favorite, trying to coax him out. He finally moved into the show pool at 2:15 p.m., just in time for final preparations for the 2:30 p.m. In the trainer-ready room, Lisa suited up for what would be her last performance. Security cameras show her taking twice as long as usual, checking and rechecking equipment she'd used thousands of times before. At 2:42 p.m., she did something she'd never done before. She removed her engagement ring, the one Davidson had given her before their breakup but which she still wore, and locked it in her locker. I think part of her knew, Jennifer Walsh reflected later. Some primitive part of her brain was screaming warnings. But the rational part, the trainer part, the part that loved Samson, that part was louder. At 2:45 p.m., Lisa Park walked onto the stadium platform for the last time. The sun was shining. The crowd was cheering. Samson was waiting in the water, still and watchful as a submarine missile. The show began exactly on time. In 7 minutes, it would end in a way that would haunt everyone who witnessed it for the rest of their lives. Friday, March 15, 2019, 2:45 p.m. The California sun hung high in a cloudless sky, casting sharp shadows across SeaWorld's Shamu Stadium. The temperature was a perfect 72 degrees Fahrenheit, with a gentle breeze carrying the mixed scents of saltwater, sunscreen, and popcorn. The stadium's 5,500 seats were nearly full, spring break crowds eager for the spectacular finale show of the day. Everything appeared normal, routine safe. Lisa Park emerged from the trainer entrance with measured steps, her movements betraying none of the tension that had built over the previous. She wore her professional smile, the one that had graced thousands of souvenir photos, as she waved to the cheering crowd. Her wetsuit was still damp from the earlier session, clinging to her athletic frame as she made her way to the main platform. The familiar weight of her emergency recall device pressed against her hip, a safety tool she'd never had to use in 8 years. Samson was positioned in the center of the main pool, approximately 30 feet from the platform. He floated motionless, his massive black dorsal fin drooped to the left, breaking the surface like a warning flag that everyone had learned to ignore. His positioning was unusual. Typically he'd be actively swimming, anticipating the show's beginning. Instead, he hung in the water, seemingly suspended, his dark eyes tracking Lisa's every movement with an intensity that penetrated even from that distance. The show announcer's voice boomed across the stadium. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to One Ocean, where humans and killer whales unite in a spectacular display of trust, intelligence, and grace. The scripted words, spoken thousands of times before, would later seem like cruel irony to those who witnessed what followed. Lisa descended the stairs to the slide-out platform, a shallow ledge where trainers typically began their interactions. The water temperature read 54.8 degrees on the digital display, optimal for orca comfort, challenging for extended human exposure. She knelt at the platform's edge and slapped the water 3 times, Samson's recall signal. For 5 seconds, he didn't move. Then, with deliberate slowness, he began his approach. Audience member Rebecca Martinez, seated in row 12 with her 2 children, later testified about this moment. The whale swam differently than in other shows we'd seen. Usually they rush to the trainer, eager for fish and attention. This one moved like a shark in a movie. Slow, purposeful. My son actually grabbed my arm and asked if something was wrong. At 2:47 p.m., Samson reached the platform. Lisa extended her hand in the standard greeting, palm flat against his rostrum. He accepted the touch, but didn't lean into it as usual. His 12,000-pound body remained rigid, tense. Lisa maintained her smile for the audience while her free hand subtly signaled to the spotters, trainer code for monitoring unusual behavior. The first routine was simple, a pectoral fin wave to the crowd. Lisa gave the signal, right arm extended, circular motion. Samson's response was delayed by a full second, but he complied, lifting his massive fin in a greeting that sent droplets of water sparkling in the afternoon sun. The crowd applauded. Lisa rewarded him with 2 pounds of salmon. He let the fish float beside him for several seconds before consuming them, another abnormality that only trained eyes would notice. In the control booth, show coordinator Janet Phillips was growing concerned. She keyed her radio. "Lisa, we can call it if you want. Technical difficulties." Through the booth's binoculars, she watched Lisa subtly shake her head. The show would continue. The next behavior called for Samson to swim a lap around the pool's perimeter at high speed, creating the dramatic waves that would soak the splash zone, spectators. Lisa blew her whistle, 2 short bursts, 1 long. Samson submerged immediately but didn't begin the behavior. Instead, he descended to the bottom of the 36-foot-deep pool and remained there. 10 seconds passed. 20. The audience began murmuring. Lisa maintained her performance face while walking to a different position, trying alternate angles to reconnect with Samson. At 30 seconds, she activated her underwater recall signal, a specialized frequency only he was trained to respond to. Nothing. Then Samson moved, but not in response to any signal. Security cameras with underwater views captured what happened next in chilling detail. Samson rose from the bottom with explosive power, accelerating vertically at a speed marine biologists later calculated at nearly 25 miles per hour. He wasn't performing the requested behavior, was positioning himself. Lisa, still focused on getting him to respond to commands, had moved to the slide-out platform's edge. Her feet were in the water up to her ankles, a standard position for the next planned behavior, a kiss, interaction where Samson would gently touch his rostrum to her face. It was a crowd favorite, a moment that embodied the supposed harmony between human and orca. Dr. Sarah Kim, a marine biologist who happened to be recording the show for research purposes, captured what she later described as the moment everything changed. At 2:51 p.m. and 17 seconds, Samson surfaced 15 feet from Lisa's position. But instead of approaching slowly for the kiss behavior, he spy-hopped, rising vertically until his eyes were well above water level, holding the position for an unnaturally long time. His eyes, Dr. Kim would later testify. "I've studied orca behavior for 20 years. The way he looked at her wasn't curious or playful. It was assessment, like a predator studying prey movement patterns." Lisa recognized the danger. Her body language shifted instantly from performance mode to crisis management. She stood up smoothly, sudden movements that might trigger a predatory response, and took 2 steps back from the pool's edge. Her hand moved to her emergency recall device. She began talking to Samson in low, calm tones that the microphones couldn't pick up but that witnesses described as almost hypnotic. For a moment, it seemed to work. Samson sank back into the water, disappearing from view. Lisa maintained eye contact with the spot where he'd submerged while slowly backing toward the trainer exit. She'd made it halfway, perhaps 10 feet, when Samson revealed his true intentions. In the wild, orcas are ambush predators. They attack from below, using their incredible speed and mass to strike prey with devastating force. Happen Next proved that no amount of training, no number of shows, no years of relationship building could override 35 million years of evolutionary programming. Samson launched himself from the water at an angle, his trajectory perfectly calculated. He didn't breach randomly, he targeted the exact spot where Lisa would be in the 1.5 seconds it took him to clear the platform's edge. Witnesses described the sound of his approach as like a freight train exploding from the ocean. Lisa had perhaps half a second to react. She tried to dive away from his path, but physics wasn't on her side. A human's maximum reactive speed is nothing compared to an orca moving at full acceleration. As 12,000 pounds of apex predator cleared the platform edge, his massive head struck Lisa with the force of a small car collision. The impact point was her left ribcage, just below her raised arm. The force was so tremendous that witnesses in the upper rows saw her body bend at an impossible angle before being launched through the air. She didn't scream. The blow had driven all air from her lungs. She flew in. Complete silence, arms and legs splayed, her body rotating slowly like a discarded doll. Paramedic James Foster, attending the show off-duty with his family, immediately began counting: 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. Remained airborne for 2.8 seconds, clearing a distance that investigators would later measure at exactly 31 feet. She struck the concrete wall, separating the main pool from the holding area with a sound that multiple witnesses independently described as wet cement dropping from a height. She slid down the wall, leaving a trail of blood from where her head had made contact, and came to rest on the narrow walkway trainers used to move between pools. Her body was motionless, bent at angles that made several audience members immediately turn their children's faces away. Samson, meanwhile, had crashed back into the water with explosive force, sending a tsunami of displaced water over the platforms and into the first 15 rows of spectators. As the water settled and shocked gasps filled the air, he surfaced again, spy-hopping in the exact center of the pool, rotating slowly as if surveying his handiwork. The stadium erupted. Screams. Parents grabbing children. Spectators in the splash zones scrambling over seats to escape, convinced the orca would come for them next. Someone's smartphone, still recording, captured audio of a child asking with heartbreaking innocence, "Mommy, why did Shamu hurt the lady?" In the control booth, Janet Phillips slammed the emergency alarm while screaming into her radio, "Code red. Code. Trainer down. Trainer down." The cheerful show music still playing over the speakers created a surreal soundtrack to the unfolding nightmare. But in that pool, as chaos erupted around him, Samson had achieved something with calculated precision. He had ended the show. Permanently. And he wasn't finished yet. The initial impact was only the beginning. As Lisa Park's crumpled form lay motionless on the concrete walkway, Samson executed a behavior no trainer had ever seen before. A deliberate, methodical repositioning that would haunt marine mammal experts for years to come. He submerged and swam to the pool's edge nearest Lisa's position, rising until his eyes were level with her unconscious body, studying the results of his calculated strike. Lisa's first sign of consciousness came 47 seconds after impact. Security footage shows her fingers twitching, then her right arm attempting to. The movement triggered an immediate response from Samson. He vocalized a deep, resonant call that veteran trainer Michelle Roberts later described as triumphant, almost satisfied. Then he began spy-hopping repeatedly, each time rising higher, creating waves that washed over the walkway where Lisa lay. Marcus Rodriguez was the first trainer to reach the scene, having sprinted from the adjoining stadium where he'd been preparing for the sea lion. When I rounded the corner and saw Lisa, my first thought was that she was dead, he later testified. Her left arm was bent behind her, back at an impossible angle. Blood was pooling under her head. But then she moved, tried to push herself up with her good arm, and Samson went absolutely berserk. What followed was a display of aggressive behavior unprecedented in SeaWorld's history. Samson began what marine biologists term percussive striking, using his massive tail flukes to create targeted water explosions. But these weren't random displays. Each strike sent walls of water directly at Lisa's position, washing her back down each time she attempted to rise. He was keeping her down, preventing her escape. Dr. Thomas Chin, watching from the underwater viewing area, provided crucial testimony about Samson's demeanor during these moments. This wasn't frenzied or chaotic behavior. The orca was calm, deliberate. His movements were precise. When Lisa tried to crawl toward the gate, he'd reposition and strike the water at exactly the right angle to push her back. He was playing with her. Lisa's injuries were catastrophic. The initial impact had shattered 6 ribs on her left side, punctured her lung, and caused a severe concussion. Her left shoulder was dislocated, her arm broken in 2 places. Internal bleeding had already begun. Yet somehow, operating on pure adrenaline and survival instinct, she managed to get to her knees. In the crowd, off-duty EMT Patricia Williams was already on her phone with dispatch. "We need multiple ambulances at SeaWorld immediately. Trainer attacked by orca. Severe trauma. She's conscious, but barely mobile. The whale is still actively aggressive. They can't get to her." The next phase of the attack demonstrated Samson's terrifying intelligence. As emergency response protocols activated and staff began evacuating the stadium, he changed tactics. Instead of continuing the water strikes, he positioned himself at the edge of the pool closest to Lisa and began what witnesses described as calling to her, a series of vocalizations unlike anything in his trained repertoire. Lisa, blood streaming from a gash above her left eye, made a decision that experts still debate. Instead of continuing her crawl toward the emergency exit, she turned toward Samson. Multiple witnesses reported hearing her speak, though her words were slurred from the head injury. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. I'm not mad at you." She was still trying to manage the situation, reflected Dr. Rebecca Sterling, SeaWorld's veterinarian who watched from the medical station. Even with catastrophic injuries, even after being deliberately attacked, Lisa's instinct was to calm him down. She still thought she could reach him. Samson's response shattered that illusion forever. As Lisa dragged herself closer to the pool's edge, he submerged again. For 10 seconds, the water was still. Lisa had managed to pull herself to a sitting position against the wall, her good arm pressed against her ribs, each breath a visible agony. Then Samson struck again. He breached completely, all 12,000 pounds clearing the water in a display of raw power. But this wasn't a random breach. His trajectory carried him over the pool's edge, and he landed partially on the concrete platform, his massive bulk creating a seismic impact that witnesses felt in their chest cavities. The displacement wave caught Lisa directly, slamming her back against the concrete wall with brutal force. The sound of impact, captured on multiple cell phone recordings, was sickening. Lisa's body went limp, her head lolling forward. But Samson wasn't finished. Using his pectoral fins, he maneuvered himself along the platform's edge until he was directly in front of Lisa's unconscious form. Then, in a moment that would become the subject of intense scientific debate, he opened his mouth and placed his teeth against her wetsuit. He didn't bite down. Not yet. He held her, almost gently, his teeth creating indentations in the neoprene but not breaking through. Security. Cameras show him maintaining this position for 18 seconds while chaos erupted around him. Staff members with emergency horns tried to drive him back. The underwater recall signals blared at maximum volume. Nothing worked. Jennifer Walsh, watching from the opposite platform, later described the moment. It was like he was making a decision. He had her. Could have crushed her in an instant. But he just held her, looking at her face. Then his eyes shifted, looked directly at those of us on the other platform. The message was clear: I choose what happens next. What happened next pushed the boundaries of interspecies aggression. Samson, still gripping Lisa's wetsuit, began to pull her toward the water. Not violently, but with steady, inexorable pressure. Lisa's body began sliding along the wet concrete, leaving a streak of blood from her head. That's when I knew we were going to lose her, Rodriguez admitted later. If he got her in the water, she was dead. No question. Even if she'd been conscious, even uninjured, once an aggressive orca has you in deep water, it's over. The emergency response team, trained for equipment failures and medical emergencies but not for a deliberate orca attack, faced an impossible situation. Protocols demanded they not enter the area while the animal was aggressive, but Lisa would die if they didn't act. It was head of security Tom Patterson who made the crucial decision. Get the emergency barriers up now, he screamed into his radio. Block his access to deep water. The emergency barriers, steel grates, designed to section off pools during maintenance, began their agonizingly slow descent from the sealing mechanisms. Samson recognized the threat immediately. He released Lisa and slid backward into the shallow water, then spy-hopped again, watching the barriers descend. For a moment, witnesses thought he might retreat. Instead, he demonstrated why orcas are apex predators. With explosive power, he launched himself at the descending barrier, striking it with his rostrum. The impact bent the steel frame and jammed the mechanism. The barrier stopped halfway down, enough to prevent full pool access but leaving a gap large enough for him to maneuver. He bought himself time. Rodriguez and two other trainers used this distraction to rush in. They grabbed Lisa under her arms and began dragging her away from the pools. She was unconscious, her breathing irregular and labored. Blood flowed freely from multiple wounds. They'd made it perhaps 10 feet when Samson made his final attack run. Swimming at full speed, he breached again, this time at an acute angle that brought him completely onto the platform. His massive body skidded across the wet concrete with tremendous momentum, closing the distance to the retreating trainers with terrifying speed. Rodriguez later said he felt the wind from Samson's passage, saw the orca's eye as he passed within inches. But physics finally worked against the massive predator. Unable to stop his slide on the smooth concrete, Samson crashed into the stadium's outer wall with crushing force. The impact stunned even him. For the first time in the attack, he appeared disoriented, his movements uncoordinated. It was enough. The trainers dragged Lisa through the emergency gate and slammed it shut just as Samson regained his composure. He struck the gate repeatedly, the metal groaning under each impact, but it held. On the other side, Lisa Park lay dying while Samson's frustrated vocalizations echoed through the stadium. The entire attack sequence, from first strike to gate closure, had lasted 4 minutes and 31 seconds. In that time, Samson had demonstrated planning, adaptation, and predatory intelligence that shattered every assumption about the relationship between trainers and captive orcas. It hadn't lost control, he'd taken it. As paramedics finally reached Lisa and began desperate life-saving efforts, Samson returned to the center of his pool. He spy-hopped one final time, rotating slowly, surveying the evacuated stadium, the emergency responders, the abandoned props of a show that would never happen again. Then he sank beneath the surface and went still, floating in the deepest part of his prison, waiting. The age of humans swimming with captive orcas had ended. Not with a policy change or a corporate decision, but with calculated violence that proved some boundaries should never be crossed. Lisa Park still had a pulse, but barely. The real fight for her life was just beginning. At 2:56 p.m., the first paramedic unit arrived at SeaWorld's emergency access gate. The response time of 4 minutes from initial call would normally be considered excellent, but in trauma cases, every second meant damaged tissue, oxygen-deprived organs, and diminishing chances of survival. Paramedics James Foster and Maria Gonzalez found a scene of controlled chaos, staff members frantically waving them through security trying to manage evacuating crowds, and the distant sound of Samson's continued vocalizations echoing from the stadium. They reached Lisa at 2:58 p.m. Foster, a 15-year veteran who'd seen everything from freeway pileups to industrial accidents, later described his initial assessment. She was in about as bad shape as anyone I've seen still technically alive. Massive blunt force trauma, obvious internal injuries, possible spinal damage. Her breathing was agonal, those gasping, irregular breaths that usually mean the body's shutting down. We had minutes? Maybe. Gonzalez immediately began establishing for access while Foster conducted rapid trauma assessment. Lisa's vitals were catastrophic. Blood pressure 70/40ths and dropping, heart rate 140 and thready, oxygen saturation 82%. Her left pupil was blown, indicating severe head trauma, and her abdomen was rigid and distending, suggesting internal bleeding. Foster made the call to dispatch. We need a trauma chopper immediately. Ground transport won't get her there in time. While the paramedics worked, the scene around them remained dangerously active. Wildlife Control Officer Captain Janet Morrison arrived with her specialized team, tasked with securing Samson and ensuring he couldn't pose further threat. We trained for aggressive animal scenarios, Morrison later testified, but nothing like this. This wasn't a confused or frightened animal. The orca was patrolling the pool perimeter, tracking our movements. He was still hunting. Morrison's team deployed emergency protocols that had never been used in the park's 55-year history. High-pressure water cannons were positioned around the pool, ready to drive Samson back if he attempted another platform breach. Tranquilizer equipment was prepared, though. The dosage required for a 12,000-pound orca made this option extremely dangerous. The underwater gates between pools were manually locked to prevent him from accessing other areas where trainers might need to enter. Back on the platform, Lisa's condition deteriorated rapidly. She briefly regained consciousness as the paramedics prepared her for transport. Her eyes unfocused and frightened. "Samson," she whispered through the oxygen mask. "Don't hurt Samson. It's not his fault." Then she began seizing, her body convulsing as her traumatized brain misfired. Gonzalez pushed anticonvulsants while Foster manually stabilized her neck, terrified that spinal damage would complete what Samson had started. The media response was immediate and overwhelming. News helicopters appeared overhead within minutes, their cameras capturing the surreal scene. The paramedics working desperately on a motionless form while, in the background, a massive orca spy-hopped repeatedly, seemingly watching their efforts. Social media exploded with witness videos, many too graphic for broadcast. The phrase, "SeaWorld attack," began trending worldwide before Lisa even left the park. Dr. Patricia Chin, SeaWorld's on-site physician, provided critical information to the paramedics about the mechanism of injury. The initial impact velocity was approximately 25 miles per hour, with the full mass of the orca behind it. That's equivalent to being hit by a small vehicle. The secondary impacts against the wall and platform likely caused additional trauma. She needs immediate surgical intervention. The arrival of the medical helicopter at 3:07 p.m. brought both hope and complications. The landing zone was in the parking lot, 400 yards from Lisa's position. Moving her required careful coordination, maintaining spinal immobilization while managing multiple forelines and ventilation equipment. As they prepared for transport, Samson's behavior escalated again. He began what marine biologists call acoustic aggression, producing sounds at volumes and frequencies that caused physical discomfort to humans. Several emergency responders reported sudden headaches and disorientation. It was like he was trying to interfere with the rescue. Morrison noted, "Every time we moved toward Lisa, the vocalizations intensified. We had to rotate personnel to prevent prolonged exposure." The journey to the helicopter was a desperate race against time. Lisa's blood pressure continued dropping despite aggressive fluid resuscitation. Foster performed needle decompression of her left chest when her breathing became increasingly labored, a procedure that revealed the extent of her injuries when blood-tinged air hissed out, confirming the punctured lung. They reached the helicopter at 3:14 p.m. Flight nurse Rebecca Torres took over care as they loaded Lisa into the aircraft. We see a lot of trauma flying out of San Diego, but this was exceptional. Multiple system trauma, prolonged downtime, massive blood loss. I called ahead to have every available surgeon ready. She needed miracles, not medicine. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying Lisa toward UC San Diego Medical Center's trauma unit, the scene below remained chaotic. Administrators faced the immediate crisis of over 3,000 guests who'd witnessed the attack, many deeply traumatized. Emergency counselors were called in. Parents struggled to explain to children why Shamu had hurt the trainer. The gift shops full of plush orcas and "I swam with Shamu" shirts suddenly seemed grotesque. Samson, meanwhile, had to be managed. He remained highly agitated, striking the pool walls with his tail flukes hard enough to crack concrete. Morrison's team made the difficult decision to administer a mild sedative via dart gun, enough to calm him without risking respiratory depression. It took 3 attempts before a dart found its mark, Samson actively evading the shots with disturbing intelligence. He knew what we were trying to do, Wildlife Officer Daniel Kim observed. He'd submerge whenever someone raised the dart gun, surface in different location. It was like trying to sedate a creature that could predict our moves. Back at the trauma center, word of Lisa's arrival had spread. The attack was already international news, and reporters gathered outside the hospital. Inside, trauma surgeon Dr. Robert Williams assembled his team. We prepared for everything: internal bleeding, organ damage, traumatic brain injury. What we weren't prepared for was the media circus that would complicate every aspect of her care. Lisa arrived at 3:26 p.m. Initial scans revealed the full extent of her injuries: subdural hematoma requiring immediate drainage, 6 broken ribs with lung perforation, splenic laceration, kidney contusion, multiple cervical vertebrae fractures, and severe soft tissue damage. She was rushed directly to surgery. At SeaWorld, the immediate crisis slowly transformed into a crime scene investigation. Although no crime had been committed, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife initiated standard protocols for severe wildlife attacks. Every inch of the platform was photographed. Samples were collected to test for any substances that might have triggered Samson's aggression. Witnesses were interviewed while there. Memories remained fresh. The question on everyone's mind was simple but unanswerable: why? Why had Samson, after years of successful shows, suddenly turned violent? Why had he targeted Lisa, the trainer he'd worked with most closely? Why had the attack been so calculated, so deliberate? As the sun began to set over Mission Bay, casting long shadows across the now-empty stadium, Samson finally calmed. The sedative had taken effect, and he floated quietly in his pool, occasionally spy-hopping to observe the humans who watched him from a safe distance. The show pool that had hosted thousands of performances was now a crime scene. The platform where children had met their hero was stained with blood. Captain Morrison stood at the pool's edge, maintaining the required 20-foot safety distance, and watched the orca that had changed everything. "In all my years working with wildlife," she later wrote in her report, "I've never seen an animal attack with such clear intent. This wasn't instinct or fear or confusion. This was a choice." Somewhere in the sky between SeaWorld and the hospital, a helicopter raced against time, carrying what remained of Lisa Park toward an uncertain future. The age of innocence, the belief that love and training could overcome millions of years of evolution, had ended in 4 minutes and 31 seconds of calculated violence. Now came the aftermath. Lisa Park died at 7:43 p.m. on March 15, 2019, after 4 hours of desperate surgical intervention. Despite the trauma team's heroic efforts, including emergency craniotomy to relieve brain swelling, repair of her punctured lung, and removal of her ruptured spleen, her injuries were simply too severe. Dr. Robert Williams, the lead trauma surgeon, emerged from the oar with the devastating news that would soon circle the globe. We did everything medically possible, but the extent of her injuries was incompatible with life. Lisa Park passed away surrounded by her family and the medical team who fought to save her. The official cause of death was listed as multiple blunt force trauma with associated hemorrhagic shock and traumatic brain injury. But those clinical words couldn't capture the reality that a woman who had dedicated her life to understanding and protecting marine mammals had been killed by one in the most public, violent way imaginable. Her mother, Caroline, and sister, Amanda, were at her bedside when she passed, holding the hands that had once signaled commands to a creature that ultimately chose not to obey. Within hours of Lisa's death, SeaWorld faced a crisis unprecedented in its history. CEO Joel Manby called an emergency board meeting at 10 p.m. that night. The discussion, later revealed through leaked documents, was brutal in its assessment. We have a dead trainer, a killer whale that attacked on camera, thousands of traumatized witnesses, and a global media storm. The future of this company hangs on our next decisions. The immediate decision regarding Samson was both inevitable and controversial. At 11:47 p.m., after consultation with marine mammal experts, veterinarians, and legal counsel, SeaWorld announced that Samson would not be euthanized. The statement, crafted by crisis management firm Weber Shandwick, read, "While we grieve the tragic loss of Lisa Park, we recognize that Samson is a wild animal responding to the stress of captivity. Ending his life would neither bring Lisa back nor honor her dedication to these magnificent creatures. But keeping Samson alive created new problems. He could never perform again, the liability was unthinkable. He couldn't be housed with other orcas, as his aggressive behavior posed risks to them as well. And he certainly couldn't remain in the show pool where he'd killed Lisa. SeaWorld's solution was to transfer him to a isolated holding pool, essentially solitary confinement for an animal whose species is known for complex social bonds. The Park family's response to this decision revealed the complicated emotions surrounding the tragedy. Caroline Park, Lisa's mother, issued a statement through their attorney. Lisa loved Samson until her last breath. She wouldn't want him killed because of what happened, but she also wouldn't want him to spend the rest of his life in isolation. We call on SeaWorld to find a better solution, perhaps release to a sea sanctuary, where he can live without human interaction." The investigation into the attack began immediately. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, launched a comprehensive review of SeaWorld's safety protocols. Lead investigator Maria Rodriguez spent 3 weeks interviewing witnesses, reviewing footage, and analyzing years of incident reports. Her preliminary findings, released 6 weeks later, were damning. SeaWorld ignored numerous warning signs of escalating aggression from this animal, the report stated. Internal documents show at least 17 incidents of concerning behavior in the 2 weeks preceding the fatal attack. The company prioritized show schedules and revenue over trainer safety. The report recommended $170,000 in fines and immediate cessation of all water work with orcas, effectively ending the signature performances that had defined SeaWorld for decades. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 48 hours of Lisa's death, protests formed outside every SeaWorld location. Attendance plummeted 40% in the first month. Stock prices crashed, losing $2.3 billion in market value. Social media campaigns with hashtags like #JusticeForLisa and #EmptyTheTanks gained millions of supporters. Celebrities who had previously partnered with SeaWorld publicly severed ties. But the most profound impact was on the tight-knit community of marine mammal trainers. Jennifer Walsh, Lisa's colleague and friend, left the profession entirely. "I couldn't look at the orcas the same way. Every time I approached the pool, I saw Lisa flying through the air. I saw Samson's calculated violence. The trust was broken, not just between us and one whale, but between us and the entire concept of what we were doing." A support group formed for trainers dealing with trauma from the attack. Dr. Sarah Martinez, SeaWorld's staff psychologist, reported that over 80% of trainers who witnessed the attack showed signs of PTSD. They're grieving Lisa, but they're also grieving the loss of their worldview. The trainers believed deeply in their relationships with these animals. Samson's attack shattered that belief system. The legal ramifications were swift and severe. Lisa's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit seeking $10 million in damages, alleging that SeaWorld knew of the danger and failed to protect their daughter. The lawsuit revealed internal emails showing trainers' concerns about Samson were repeatedly dismissed by management. One particularly damaging email from a senior executive read, "Spring break is our busiest season. The whale is actively dying. Shows continue as scheduled." California State Assembly member Richard Bloom introduced Lisa's Law, legislation banning all direct contact between trainers and orcas in the bill passed with overwhelming support, effectively ending waterworks shows at SeaWorld San Diego. Other states quickly followed suit. Within a year, SeaWorld announced the complete phase-out of orca shows at all locations, replacing them with educational encounters viewed from behind protective barriers. The scientific community used the tragedy to reignite debates about cetacean captivity. Dr. Naomi Rose, whose warnings about Samson had gone unheeded, published a comprehensive analysis in Marine Mammal Science. This attack wasn't an anomaly, it was an inevitability. We confine apex predators with complex emotional lives in small concrete pools. We create a powder keg of frustration and psychological damage. Lisa Park's death should mark the end of cetacean captivity for entertainment. Samson's fate remained contentious. Confined to his isolated pool, his mental state deteriorated rapidly. He engaged in increased self-harming behaviors, grinding his teeth on concrete, refusing food for days, floating listlessly for hours. Marine mammal veterinarian Dr. Patricia Chin documented his decline. "He's dying slowly. Not physically, but psychologically. Orcas are social creatures. Isolation is torture for them." 18 months after the attack, a coalition of marine organizations proposed a radical solution: release Samson to a sea pen in Iceland, near where his grandmother had been captured decades earlier. The proposal faced massive opposition from those who feared he was too dangerous to ever interact with wild orcas, and from those who believed release would reward his violence. The debate raged for another year before a compromise was reached. Samson would be transferred to a revolutionary facility in Norway, a 15-acre sea sanctuary where former captive cetaceans could live in natural seawater without performing or interacting with humans. On a foggy morning in September 2021, Samson took his last swim in a SeaWorld pool. The impact on SeaWorld was transformative and permanent. The company pivoted hard toward conservation and education, phasing out all cetacean shows. Attendance never recovered to pre-attack levels. 3 facilities closed permanently. The San Diego location, where Lisa died, converted the Orca Stadium into a sea turtle rehabilitation center. A small plaque near the entrance reads, "In memory of Lisa Park, who dedicated her life to understanding the ocean's creatures." Every March 15th, former trainers gather at a small memorial garden created in Lisa's honor. They share memories, support each other, and grapple with the complex legacy of their profession. Marcus Rodriguez, who tried to save Lisa that day, now works as a marine conservation advocate. "We thought we were partners with these animals. Lisa's death taught us we were captors. The best way to honor her memory is to ensure no trainer ever faces that terrible realization again." The last orca show at an American marine park took place on December 31, 2019. As midnight approached and the final trainer took their final bow, an era ended. Not with celebration or fanfare, but with the somber recognition that some boundaries between humans and nature should never be crossed. Lisa Park paid the ultimate price for that lesson. Her death ensured no one else would have to. Dr. Ingrid Visser, one of the world's foremost orca researchers with over 30 years studying both wild and captive populations, flew from New Zealand to participate in the official investigation. Her analysis of Samson's attack would become the definitive scientific examination of what went wrong that day. This wasn't a random act of aggression, Dr. Visser explained during her testimony. This was a calculated response from an intelligent being pushed beyond its psychological breaking point. Every aspect of the attack showed planning, intention, and frankly, remarkable restraint given what he was capable of. Dr. Visser's behavioral analysis identified 17 distinct aggressive behaviors Samson displayed during the 4-minute attack, each more sophisticated than the last. The initial strike was precisely aimed at Lisa's center of mass, maximizing impact while minimizing the chance she could evade. The follow-up behaviors, the water strikes to keep her down, the controlled grabs with his teeth, these showed he was modulating his aggression. He could have killed her instantly at any point. Instead, he demonstrated what I can only describe as punitive behavior. Neurobiologist Dr. Lori Marino, who has spent decades studying cetacean brain structure, provided crucial context about orca intelligence. The orca brain contains spindle neurons associated with empathy, social cognition, and self-awareness. Their limbic system, the emotional center, is significantly more complex than humans. When we consider Samson's actions through this lens, we're not looking at a simple predator-prey interaction. We're looking at an emotional response from a being capable of complex feelings including frustration, anger, and possibly even revenge. The physical mechanics of the attack were analyzed by biomechanics expert Dr. James Patterson from UC San Diego. Using video footage and computer modeling, he calculated the forces involved. At the moment of impact, Lisa experienced approximately 8,000 pounds of force, concentrated in a surface area of less than 2 square feet. That's equivalent to being hit by a compact car at 30 miles per hour. The fact that she survived the initial impact at all is remarkable. The trajectory of her flight, 31 feet in a parabolic arc, required Samson to calculate angle, force, and timing with split-second precision. Veterinary behaviorist Dr. Rebecca Sterling, who had examined Samson regularly for 5 years, offered insights into his deteriorating mental state. In the months leading to the attack, Samson showed classic signs of what we call zoochosis. Repetitive behaviors, self-mutilation, hyper-aggression. His cortisol levels were 3 times normal baseline. In human terms, he was experiencing chronic, severe stress with no outlet. The attack wasn't surprising from a behavioral standpoint. What's surprising is that it took so long to happen. Dr. Sterling's necropsy reports on Samson's physical condition were equally disturbing. His teeth were worn down to the gums from grinding on concrete, a behavior never seen in wild orcas. He had chronic infections from these exposed tooth pulps. His dorsal fin collapse wasn't just cosmetic, it indicated compromised circulation. He was in constant, chronic pain. Pain that Lisa, despite her best intentions, couldn't alleviate, because the source was his captivity itself. Former SeaWorld trainer Jeffrey Vontra, who became a vocal critic after leaving the industry, provided insider perspective on the training culture that contributed to the tragedy. We were taught that these animals loved us, that performing was enriching for them. We believed our own propaganda. Lisa epitomized this mindset. She genuinely believed her relationship with Samson transcended the captor-captive dynamic. The delusion cost her life. Vontra analyzed the specific training protocols that failed. The emergency recall signals, the safety positions, the spotter system, none of it matters when a 12,000-pound predator decides to attack. We were given the illusion of control. Lisa executed her emergency protocols perfectly. She did everything right. And it didn't matter because you cannot train away millions of years of evolution. Comparative psychologist Dr. Diana Rice examined the attack in context of orca intelligence and social structures. In the wild, orcas have complex social hierarchies and conflict resolution mechanisms. In captivity, these are completely disrupted. Samson had no way to express dominance, establish territory, or engage in natural social behaviors. The trainers became surrogate pod members, but ones he couldn't interact with naturally. The attack can be seen as an attempt to establish dominance in the only way available to him. Marine mammal veterinarian Dr. Naomi Rose, whose warnings about Samson were ignored, didn't mince words in her analysis. This attack was predictable and preventable. Every indicator was there: the escalating aggression, the self-directed violence, the breakdown in trained behaviors. SeaWorld chose revenue over safety. They sacrificed Lisa on the altar of entertainment. Her death was not a tragic accident, it was an inevitable consequence of keeping apex predators in swimming pools. Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Michael Branchman offered a unique perspective, applying human psychological models to understand Samson's state of. If we consider the documented behaviors leading up to the attack, Samson exhibited symptoms consistent with what we diagnose as severe PTSD in humans, hypervigilance, aggression, dissociation. The attack itself resembles what we call explosive disorder, a sudden, violent outburst after prolonged psychological pressure. The difference is, humans have treatment options. Samson had none. The acoustic analysis by Doctor and Bowles revealed perhaps the most chilling insights. In the weeks before the attack, Samson's vocalizations showed increasing dissonance. Literally, his calls became discordant, fragmented. He was creating new sounds outside his trained repertoire, possibly expressing emotions or concepts for which orcas have no natural vocabulary. During the attack itself, his vocalizations matched patterns we've recorded from wild orcas during aggressive encounters. He reverted to ancestral behaviors despite never witnessing them. Biomechanics expert Dr. Sarah Chun studied the specific technique Samson used in his attacks. The initial ramming behavior mirrors how orcas in Antarctica knock seals off ice floes. The water strike technique resembles wave-washing hunting behaviors. Despite being born in captivity, Samson accessed genetically encoded hunting strategies. This suggests these behaviors are so fundamental to orca nature that they persist even without learning opportunities. Legal expert Dr. Thomas Mitchell examined the regulatory failures that enabled the tragedy. Multiple agencies had oversight of SeaWorld's operations. OSHA, USDA, state wildlife departments, all had received reports of concerning incidents. The regulatory capture was complete. Agencies tasked with protection became enablers of exploitation. Lisa Park died because every system designed to protect her was compromised by corporate influence. The consensus among experts was damning and unanimous. Lisa Park's death was the predictable result of forcing an incompatible relationship between humans and orcas. Dr. Visser summarized the collective findings. We took Earth's most intelligent, social, wide-ranging marine predator and confined it in a concrete box. We asked it to perform tricks for fish and applause. We convinced ourselves this was mutualistic rather than exploitative. Samson's attack stripped away that comfortable delusion. He reminded us, with brutal clarity, what orcas really are: entertainers, not friends, but apex predators deserving of respect, fear, and most importantly, freedom. The expert testimony transformed public understanding of cetacean captivity. No longer could the industry claim their animals were happy, willing participants. Samson had shattered that narrative with calculated violence that spoke louder than any protest or documentary. The experts agreed. The age of human orca performance was over, ended not by legislation or changing public opinion, but by an orca who decided he'd had enough. Lisa Park's tragedy teaches us that love, dedication, and expertise cannot overcome the fundamental incompatibility between human ambition and animal autonomy. She possessed every quality we associate with exceptional animal care: patience, understanding, genuine affection, and professional skill. Yet these very qualities blinded her to the growing danger, making her believe she had transcended the predator-captive divide. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our relationship with the natural world and the price of entertainment. The warning signs were impossible to miss in hindsight. Samson's escalating aggression, his self-harming behaviors, his breakdown in trained responses, each was a desperate communication from an intelligent being saying, enough. The grinding of teeth on concrete until they wore to exposed nerves. The ramming of gates until his rostrum bled. The creation of entirely new vocalizations to express inexpressible frustration. Behaviors screamed distress, yet the show went on because we chose not to listen. Lisa Park is remembered not as a victim but as a catalyst for change. Her mother, Caroline, established the Lisa Park Foundation for Cetacean Welfare, which has raised over $12 million for sea sanctuaries and wild orca research. Lisa died believing she was helping these animals, Caroline. The best way to honor her is to actually help them by ending their captivity. The Foundation's work has contributed to 3 sea sanctuaries opening worldwide, providing homes for 23 former captive cetaceans. The regulatory changes following Lisa's death were 911, what's your emergency? There's been an accident at SeaWorld. The orca, oh God, the trainer. She's not moving. The whale grabbed her and threw her. Please, we need paramedics now. In the gleaming amphitheater of SeaWorld San Diego, beneath a perfect California sun, what began as a routine afternoon show would become a nightmare that shattered the illusion of safety between humans and the ocean's apex predators. The date was March 15, 2019. The time, 2:47. The water temperature, a carefully controlled 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Every detail had been meticulously planned, every safety protocol supposedly in place. But none of it would matter in the next 7 minutes. Lisa Park was 28 years old, a senior marine mammal trainer with a smile that could light up the darkest corners of the backstage areas. She had dedicated the last 8 years of her life to understanding, training, and performing with orcas. That afternoon, she stepped onto the platform. Wearing her signature wetsuit, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, completely unaware that she would never walk out of that stadium the same way again. The 6,000-pound orca waiting in the water had a name that would soon be whispered in horror by everyone who witnessed what happened next. Samson. He had been acting differently all morning, but the show must go on. The stands were packed with over 3,000 spectators, including dozens of children clutching their stuffed Shamu dolls, their faces painted with dolphins and whales, their excitement palpable in the salt-tinged. This is Lisa Park's story. A story of trust shattered in seconds, of the thin line between performance and peril, and the moment when a magnificent creature reminded humanity that some boundaries should never be crossed. What you're about to witness isn't just another animal attack story. It's a wake-up call that forever changed how we view the relationship between humans and captive orcas. You're watching Animal Attack Chronicles, where we bring you the most shocking real-life animal encounters, thoroughly researched and respectfully told. If this story grips you, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon, because what you're about to witness will change how you see marine parks forever. But be warned, this isn't just another SeaWorld incident. This is the attack that even veteran trainers call the throw. That changed everything. The audience that day had no idea they were about to witness history. They came for the splashes, the synchronized swimming, the majestic breach of a killer whale against the backdrop of Mission Bay. Parents had paid $89 per ticket, packed cameras and ponchos, promised their children memories that would last a lifetime. They would get their memorable experience, but not the kind anyone had bargained for. Security footage would later show Lisa doing her final equipment check at 2:31 p.m. She tested her emergency recall signal, checked her wetsuit zipper, and exchanged a fist bump with fellow trainer Marcus Rodriguez. Something feels off about Samson today, Rodriguez would later testify. He told her. Lisa's response? He's just being moody. We've worked through worse. Those would be some of the last coherent words she would speak for the next 3 months. The stadium's underwater viewing area was packed with visitors pressing their faces against the 6-inch thick acrylic panels, watching Samson glide past with what seemed like graceful indifference. But marine biologist Dr. Catherine Wells, who happened to be visiting that day with her daughter, noticed something others missed. His eye movement was erratic, she would later tell investigators. In my 20 years studying orcas, I'd never seen that particular pattern of agitation. I actually grabbed my daughter's hand to leave, but then the music started. That music, an upbeat remix of ocean sounds mixed with pop melodies, had played thousands of times before. It was Samson's cue, Lisa's entrance theme, and the audience's signal that magic was about to happen. The first 3 notes triggered a Pavlovian response in the crowd. Phones came out, children rushed to the splash zone, and conversations ceased. Lisa emerged from the trainer platform with her characteristic confidence, raising both arms to acknowledge the thunderous applause. The sun caught the droplets of water on her wetsuit, creating a momentary halo effect that several audience members captured in what would become the last photos ever taken of Lisa Park standing upright. She blew a whistle, and Samson rose from the depths, his massive dorsal fin cutting through the surface like a black sail against the cerulean water. For exactly 4 minutes and 23 seconds, everything went according to plan. Lisa and Samson performed their routine flawlessly, the shallow water work, the splash behaviors, the synchronized spins that had taken years to perfect. The crowd was mesmerized. Children squealed with delight as planned waves soaked the first 5 rows. Instagram stories captured what appeared to be another perfect show at the happiest place in the ocean. Then, at 2:51 p.m. and 17 seconds, Samson missed his cue. It was subtle, a half-second delay in his response to Lisa's hand signal for a backflip. Most of the audience didn't notice, but Lisa did. And in the control booth, veteran show coordinator Janet Phillips reached for her radio. She never got to make that call. Lisa Park wasn't just another marine mammal trainer chasing an ocean dream. She was SeaWorld San Diego's golden child, the trainer other trainers watched to learn, the one management trusted with their most challenging animals, the face they put on billboards along Interstate 5. A profession where turnover was high and burnout common, Lisa had not only survived but thrived for 8 remarkable years. Born on July 12, 1990, in landlocked Topeka, Kansas, Lisa's obsession with the ocean began with a documentary she watched at age 7. Saw Free Willy and that was it, her mother, Caroline Park, would later tell reporters through tears. But it wasn't about freeing the whale for her. She wanted to be the one in the water, the one who understood them. She'd fill our bathtub and hold her breath underwater, timing herself with my kitchen timer. Her father, Robert Park, a structural engineer, built her a 15-foot above-ground pool in their backyard when she turned 10. Lisa spent entire summers in that pool, practicing swimming techniques she'd studied in library books, developing the lung capacity that would later allow her to hold her breath for nearly 4 minutes underwater. Neighbors thought the Parks were raising a future Olympian. They had no idea their daughter's dreams swam in much deeper, more dangerous waters. Lisa's path to SeaWorld wasn't typical. She earned a full academic scholarship to the University of Miami, where she double-majored in marine biology and psychology. Her thesis, Cognitive Recognition Patterns,